this process can be really overwhelming and really daunting. So your roadmap is a piece of advocacy for people going through this process, right? Because they can understand it. And I think, in the cancer stuff, it was critical, like, because people just take what they hear and they take it and they accept it. And sometimes that's not the best thing. And you have to push for yourself and not care what other people think about it, but just know that you did everything that you could to control your outcome.
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in la la land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Imagine facing an unexpected cancer diagnosis, losing your fertility at 33 years old, enduring the heartbreak of failed IVF and surrogacy attempts, and ultimately finding the strength to walk down the path of adoption. This is the incredible journey of our guest today, Kate Papkin. Kate, a resilient breast cancer survivor and a powerhouse in the real estate industry, lives in Northern Virginia with her husband, Sam, and their three wonderful children, Bradley, Connor, and Alexandra. Despite the challenges she faced, Kate's unwavering determination and advocacy led her to adopt her daughter, Alexandra, a decision that completed her family in ways she never imagined. With over 20 years of experience in real estate, Kate is a dynamic leader, passionate about inspiring others to live life by design. She dedicates her time to coaching business professionals on mindset and growth, emphasizing the importance of self-advocacy in both personal and professional realms. Her personal story, coupled with her professional expertise, offers a powerful testament to the power of perspective and overcoming adversity. Kate is also the co-author of The Parents' Report Card, a book dedicated to enhancing communication between parents and their children, fostering awareness, and creating generational impact. This book promotes a movement towards more engaged and reflective parenting practices, emphasizing that constructive dialogue at home can significantly benefit both children and parents. And the best part, she co-authored it with her dad. Join us as Kate Papkin shares valuable insights and practical advice for those navigating their own adoption journeys and beyond. Prepare to be inspired, and perhaps some of Kate's incredible resilience, love, and relentless pursuit of family will resonate with you. Welcome, Kate. I'm so excited to have you. And I want to start by having you share your parenting story.
Sure. Well,
yes. Go ahead.
Becca, thank you so much for having me. When you started the podcast, I knew I wanted to come on and share because of the impact that your company had in me being able, Sam and I, being able to complete our family. And I know we'll get to that later, but just the intro makes me emotional to hear kind of the path. So to start, it was about 10 years ago, right about now, like the end of the summer. We were married for 4 years at the time. Our boys were 3 and 18 months. We went on a family vacation to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And as most of you know out there that have young kids, a vacation with young kids is not really a vacation. And I came home and I was like just overwhelmed, and it had been a long week. And I said, I just want to take a really long shower. Like, I just want to be alone for 20 minutes and take a long shower. In that shower, I guess I did a breast exam. I don't remember thinking that that's what was going to happen, but I remember feeling something that didn't feel right, that I didn't feel before, and took it seriously, thank goodness. Got it checked out pretty quickly, had a very experienced doctor tell me, you're young, they're going to tell you it's nothing. Don't let them tell you it's nothing. And at that moment, I was like, this is not good. Fast forward, biopsies, ultrasounds, mammograms, all the things, only to be confirmed that at 32 at the time, that I was, I had breast cancer. One of the first meetings I had was with the surgeon, because my path was surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, hormone therapy, which I'm actually still on today, 10 years later. And the surgeon, I think, had the hardest job because she had to break down what was really going on. And she said, you're going to lose your breasts. I said, okay, I can handle that. They were good to me while I had them, She said, you're going to lose your hair. I said, okay, it'll grow back. Not ideal, but it'll be interesting to see what I look like bald. We'll see. Then she said, you're not going to have any more biological children. And I lost it. And it makes me emotional even to think about it now. So that was the part that I was like, there is no way that this diagnosis and this process is going to take away my ability to complete my family. Sam and I always knew we wanted a big family. We wanted 3 or 4 kids. I'm one of 4. He has a lot of cousins and extended family. And it was never in our cards or wildest dreams that we wouldn't be able to fulfill that in a way that, thankfully wasn't that difficult for us with the first 2. And I certainly didn't think the last time I was actually pregnant with Connor would be the last time I was pregnant. So that was the hardest part. That was the gut punch. And in that moment, I decided no matter how this has to happen or look like, or whatever this path looks like, the end result, and I'll know that I can close this chapter when I get there. Now, there's a lot in between there of what happened until we are where we are today. And yet that was kind of how it started. So, yeah.
Wow. So how old were your kids at that time?
So they were 3 and 18 months. Luckily, in hindsight, I'm grateful that they were that young because they didn't fully understand to be scared or the fear. They would wear my wigs and my hats, and we would take pictures. I actually let them cut my hair because when they would say to me, Mommy, what happened to your hair? I said, well, you cut it off, remember? And that was enough. And they were like, oh, right, yeah. And so they were young, and then came very abrupt, surgery. And I had to fit IVF in between surgery and chemo because they said, you have to get all this done before the chemo if you ever want to have a chance at having a biological child, mostly, via surrogate. Like, it won't be through you because your cancer was hormone positive. So at that time, they believed that was not going to be healthy for me to do.
So you were doing egg retrieval for surrogate in thoughts that you might do a surrogate?
Right. So talk about all these questions that you never ever think you need to think about or ask. And they really encouraged us to just do egg retrieval and not make them embryos, because what if what if we got divorced in the process? What if, whatever. So all these things. So we do that. We fit in the IVF cycle in between a double mastectomy and 8 rounds of chemo. And I had 17 eggs from that process. And fast forward
wow.
yeah, I know.
You were very fertile at that time.
I was feeling pretty good about that. I was like, okay, I'm like, fertility wasn't, thankfully.
I mean, I think I had one when I was going through fertility. Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, exactly. I was like, we are good. I was like, we're going to do embryos, and then we're going to like figure out which ones are girls. And then I'm going to have my daughter that I've always wanted. Like, this was the honest, like, I need to find a surrogate. Who knew that was actually easier than I had thought. And yet, anyway, so 17 eggs turns into 1 embryo that was viable.
Wow.
And they did the PGS testing and all the testing that was available, we got, and they called me and they said, I know the gender of the embryo. Like, do you want to know? And I said, well, yeah, I want to know.
Hold on. This was after your cancer treatments?
Yes.
So you in between, you did the egg retrieval after your cancer treatments. You were still alive and kicking and strong and said, okay, now or never, let's do this. And then you embryoed it. You made it into an embryo.
Yes. So they made me wait. They made us wait 3 years to be able to even do that.
Okay.
Because they wanted to make sure that I didn't have an immediate recurrence, because, they were like, if you're going to go down this path and you're going to have more children, like, we want you to have the peace of mind, because for every year that you are a survivor, your recurrence rate goes down slightly. And so I guess I kind of skipped like a whole couple of years in there. But yeah, as I was kind of recovering and going to therapy and learning and applying all my coaching skills to myself, I was like, okay, I'm in a position like where I was waiting it out. Like, when can I do this? And actually found a surrogate on a Facebook group that had been a surrogate before. And she was from Texas. And so Sam and I flew out to Texas and met a stranger in her home with her husband and her 2 children and talked about what this process would look like. We flew her out to Virginia to our fertility center, and we went through all the testing with her, both physical, psychological. There's a whole process to that, and invested a lot of money, thousands of dollars. And our 1 little embryo, that was a boy. So I was already like, well, okay, if this works, we're still going to go adopt a girl. Like, I told Sam that like the day we found out, and he goes, whoa, hold on. He's like, let's do this. Cause he was not very open to adoption at first.
Okay.
Which I know we'll talk about in a little bit. So we do everything. We fly her out to Virginia. We do the implantation with our 1 and only embryo, and it failed. And so she called me about a week and a half later and was like, it's a no. And she was emotional and I was a mess. And I was like, well, there it goes. That was our last biological shot. Mm-hmm. So I was already struggling with not carrying, but I was kind of okay with the outcome. And yet that was no longer an option. So we took about a year and we grieved that, which I think was really important, because I think coming into any other option or alternative without grieving it and giving yourself time to understand, is this still really what you want? Is this still something you're willing to put your heart and soul and money into? So that was rough.
Okay. Whoosh. That is a lot. And I'm just curious, during that time, did your kids know what was going on? Did you talk to them about, we're going to try to have another baby, and explain all the surrogacy stuff, or had you not done that yet?
So they were still pretty young at that time. I think they were like 6 and 4. So they didn't really understand. I mean, we had introduced them to our surrogate when she came to our house. She stayed with us for several days after the implantation.
Okay.
So, but they did not understand what we were trying to do. No, not at that time.
Okay. So, I mean, you've been through a lot at this point between your cancer and all the fertility and all of that. And you have these two healthy children.
Yeah.
What gave you the strength to continue trying to build your family when it would have been so easy just to say, okay, we have these two beautiful children?
So I struggled with that a little bit because people would say that to me all the time.
Yeah.
Like, you're going through these extreme circumstances and you're doing these things that are somewhat unconventional, or at least in their opinion. But not following this through was never an option for me. Like, I've never had more conviction around this than I've had in anything in my life.
Wow.
I think being the only girl, the relationship with my mom and I is so important to me that I wanted that with a daughter. And even having these two amazing biological boys, and understanding that what we were, the surrogacy, the adoption journey had risk associated, right? Or unknown, but so does everything. That it was still something that I felt so strongly about. And I sat there in that surgeon's office 10 years ago, about this time of the year. It was about September. And I don't know if it was because the option was taken from me, essentially, but I needed this to happen to get full closure to the entire process. And I needed to figure out a way to succeed and build my vision of my family and have what I always thought I would have and wanted. And that just made it so I never gave up.
I'd imagine too that some of it had to do with reclaiming your power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just, I always visualized that I would have a baby girl. Like, I didn't know how it would happen. I didn't know, despite all the cards being stacked against us multiple times in multiple ways. And then now I look back and I'm like, well, no wonder all those things happened, because if they didn't happen, and if the timing didn't happen the way that it did, and all the heartbreak and all the hardship and all the impatience and all the things, I would have never been led to your company. I would have never been led to our birth mom, and we wouldn't have our daughter. So
I love that you said that. I love that you said that. There are two things that you've said that I just want to reiterate. One is that you gave yourself time to grieve. You gave yourself a year to grieve, I think is what you said. And that's so important for people. I often get people who are just coming out of miscarriage or some sort of loss or infertility, and they're like, "No, we're ready. We're ready." Or they tried to do both at one time and then suddenly they disappear. Even knowing that they wanted to move forward with adoption in case fertility didn't work, and then when it didn't work, they disappeared. Why? Because they needed time to breathe, and they needed time to, they needed to take that time for themselves. And I think that's really important. And so glad that you knew enough inside of yourself to do that. And then the other thing was that everything happens for a reason, which I believe it always kind of ends up the way it's going to be, like it's supposed to be. It happens the way it's supposed to happen.
And it's so hard to accept that when you're in the thick of any hurt or pain. And looking back, I mean, there were so many times that I was just like, will it happen? Like, what if it doesn't? But I promise you now, everyone who meets our daughter is like, you are God's plan. Like, you were put here in the exact right situation at the exact right time. And everyone says to me, like, wow, you really saved her from a very different life. And I said, no. I said, she saved me. I said that you got to get that.
Quite literally.
Right. I said, so it's, so anyway, finally we got there years later, but I mean, this is 10 years ago that, she's 4 now. And I know we'll talk more about that process, but yeah, time to grieve, and definitely kind of trusting that if you just do the next step, everything will kind of come together.
Okay, so I have to stop for a song break because I have to sing Que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. But it's not all Que sera, sera, whatever will be, because there was a lot of intention behind your journey.
Mm-hmm.
So now surrogacy doesn't work. And you know right away that adoption is the next step for you because you already said it to Sam and he tried to put the brakes on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so where was Sam in his thought process here?
So Sam was very opposed to adoption pretty much the whole time. I mean, he had known a couple people who had adopted or have been adopted, and those specific situations, what he knew about them were some challenges, right? So that's what he associated with that. I At one point after the failed surrogacy, we considered embryo adoption, which I didn't know was a thing until I learned that it was. Um, at one point, he was very much of the opinion, like, I would like this baby to have one of our DNA if we can't have both. So we looked at options there, but that still required surrogacy, and our surrogate, love her and so grateful. But after that failed attempt, she's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do this to you. I can't chance that it doesn't work. So she was no longer willing to do that. So we did a lot of research. We talked to people we knew that were that had adopted. We talked to people that had looked into adoption, and that's actually how we found you. So a friend of Sam's, which was really helpful because it was his friend, and they were struggling, and they had multiple failed surrogacy attempts with a family member. Her sister was willing to be their surrogate, and they had been referred to you through another friend, and they had done an intake, and they had gotten ready because they were like, okay, we're going to try one more time, and if it doesn't work, we're going to go down the adoption road. Well, here, their surrogate, her sister, got pregnant with twins, and it worked. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, and fast forward now, like 4 years after that, they got pregnant naturally on their own after being told for like years that they couldn't, right? So they now have 3 kids. And so they were the ones who were like, look, there's this company that helps you navigate this entire process, because that was part of Sam's issue, was like skepticism about how does this even work? Like, I've heard it takes years to adopt. I've heard you need to be on wait lists forever. Yeah. I've heard it's so expensive. I've heard, all these things that we've heard. And when our friends told us, no, this company like specializes in breaking it down and walking you through and holding your hand essentially through each piece. Because the other thing we were battling was a time window, right? Because we really didn't want our kids to be more than 10 years apart. And I was trying to do this.
Oh, that's a big time window.
Right. Because they were already getting older and older and older each time. I had to wait out the cancer reoccurrence time frame. I had to wait out the surrogate. I had to grieve, we grieved. It was like, so by this time you're like 6 years late or 5 years into it. So we didn't want them to be more than 10 years apart. And then I was trying to I didn't want to be over 40 when we had a baby. Right. So we were like, okay, let's give it so I finally got him to agree, let's give it a go and give it this amount of time. And if it doesn't work, then it wasn't meant to be, even though in my mind I was like, this is going to work. And
what was the amount of time?
It was 18 months.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
So
reasonable.
So then we got introduced to you and Rachel and just started the whole process.
And Rachel's one of our consultants. Yeah. Okay.
Rachel's amazing. Rachel.
She is.
Our birth mom told us at one point, I said, why did you pick us? And she said, because you're the only one that wrote a letter. And that was Rachel. That was her advice. And I'm sure maybe part of like the, what the recommendation is. but she helped us write this letter to really help connect with her in different ways where we had similarities. And she said that the letter was really heartfelt and touching to her, and that was one of the reasons that she picked us. So
That's awesome. And I'll say something about letter writing. I was just having a conversation with a family about that today. Writing a letter is always a great idea if you have something to say that connects you to her. If it's just writing a letter to say what's already in your profile book, then don't do it. It becomes a little bit too desperate looking. But if you read something about her and you're like, oh my God, she loves collaging. I love collaging. Is that even a thing? Like
yeah,
collaging?
collaging.
Okay, good, because I don't. That's when you write a letter, because that maybe wasn't in your profile book, but it should have been. So that's awesome. I love that. It also reminds me of another story about a profile book where I was working with two artists and they didn't put anything about their hobby of music and art in their book. And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
dudes, you need to put that in there. That makes you unique. And why did they get chosen? Because of that. It's those little details that you might think are nothing, but they are. So when you started the adoption journey, do you feel like you knew anything about adoption? Did you think it would be easy? Sam didn't, but did you have a different opinion, or what
I
did you
knew
learn?
I knew nothing. Like honestly, I had one friend who is also a breast cancer survivor who adopted their first child. And so she was my one and only kind of resource at the time. And her situation was a private match through a church. So it's very different. And I didn't know anything. And so we kind of leaned in. In hindsight, I think the home study process was even more intricate and took a little more time than I had thought. And yet the matching part for us took so much less time than I thought. And so when I was wrapping my head around how your consulting company operates,
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm even allowed to say this, but I
for
feel
sure.
like I relate it to real estate, right? Because that's
Yeah,
my industry and my background. So I'm like, it's kind of like knowing about all the off market houses that are out there in
yeah,
the world, right? Because
yeah,
otherwise you wouldn't know what agencies to even apply to, what states are more adoption friendly than not. Like all this whole learning curve was just new information that I would have never thought. I would have thought to look up a local agency and go on a wait list and probably never get matched, right? I don't
yeah.
know. So once I learned and I was able to think about it in my way, my industry, and relate, I'm like, this is so smart. Like you're active with multiple agencies at the same time. You're vetting situations. I think the other thing that really helped Sam and I was the videos and the modules, because it forced us to have conversations about what we initially thought we were comfortable with didn't end up being what we were comfortable with. Different scenarios,
Yeah.
different situations, different things to think about. At one point, we were so wanting this so badly that I was like, I'm open to everything. Right. And then he was like, well, hold on a second. Let's think about this, this, and this. And then we were able to sort of refine like what situations we would be comfortable with. And I think we would have never known to even have that dialogue if we weren't prompted to do it. So really didn't know much, but ended up going through it and learning a lot about us, learning a lot about the process and how it works.
What did you learn about yourselves?
Um, I think we learned that there's no difference to us in how we parent these kids. And I think he thought it might feel different, or he might not love her the same, or how could it be the same? And we talk about it probably once a week when she does something silly or goofy or interacts with one of her brothers, and how much they love her, and how like the environment that you're in and the nurture aspect like really does matter. Like I understand there's there's biology and there's DNA, but to watch her continue to grow up and know like there's definitely our DNA, our fingerprint on that for sure. And it just, I mean, I don't know, just that you're capable of so much that like sometimes we look back in shock that like we went through all this, like, but we did, and it worked out exactly the way we wanted. But it really forced us to have a lot of conversations that initially we wouldn't have known to have.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, through all of this journey, and we'll talk a little bit more about the adoption journey, but what did you learn about your relationship with your husband?
That when we're on the same page, we can, accomplish anything, that it's truly a partnership, right? I mean, like, down to the home study, like, okay, you tackle these things, I'm going to tackle these things, because you have to constantly be pushing it forward. And that I can't imagine our family any other way now. I mean, I always say I want to adopt one more, and he says no. He said we're good.
We can do it on the side.
I know. I'll call you later. So yeah, just that. Just that. Like for something that seems so out of reach and so potentially impossible, especially the hurdles that kept coming. That we got there together. We're stronger because of it. And she has made our family better and our lives immensely better. And now to watch the two of them, oh my gosh, he is like, what is this saying? Like wrapped around her finger or vice versa. Yeah. Like, I mean, they are like this. And he, every night when she goes to bed, she's 4, so we haven't told her yet, but we say to her every night, we prayed for you, we found you, and we love you. And she says it now back. And it's just like the cutest thing ever. I know. So to hear him do that with her, I'm like, look how far we've come.
And I would encourage you to start telling her story.
Yeah.
If you haven't already. It's never too early. Day one.
Mm-hmm.
So start now. Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. What else? Was there anything through working with RG Adoption Consulting that was an aha moment for you, or something that was really helpful for you that you didn't realize would be?
I mean, so much. Like just how to navigate the home study process, how to qualify what scenarios we were open to, how to use outside resources like doctors and lawyers to look at different aspects of opportunities, or later on, like the actual situations themselves. How to apply to multiple agencies at the same time, even down to being in the delivery room with the birth mom. Like there were some things that happened that I called Rachel and was like, is this normal? What should I do as my next step? What should I expect? So for me, being a coach and being in real estate, I'm really big into, thorough communication, proper expectation setting. And so for me, I think without working with your company, I don't think I would have, I know we wouldn't have been able to navigate it within our time frame and with the sanity that we were able to do it with.
Yeah.
And I think we ended up matching after it was our third situation that we wanted to go forward. And, everyone told me, and Rachel told me, you will know something intuitively. And I'm like, oh gosh, like I just want to know, like, do I know? Like, I don't know if I know. And in our situation that night that we learned about it, I went into the room that we had designated as the nursery, and I sat there and I was like, do I know? And I was like, this is it. I know, like, this is it.
Did the chair start to rock or something?
I don't know. Nothing happened. I was just in there like, do I know? Is this happening? And it sounds so crazy, but I intuitively had a feeling like, okay, this is it. And, we knew we were one of 5 families, I think, that were being presented. And then we got the call on Connor's birthday. And they said to us, tell Connor happy birthday and that he'll be getting a baby sister for his birthday.
Oh,
and Sam
my God,
lost it. So that was kind of cool to see too, like a full circle moment with him
all over my body.
Yeah,
that is the cutest.
It was incredible. It really was. On his birthday. And then we flew out to meet her. So yeah.
That's amazing. So you're a mindset coach. First of all, what does that mean? And I love that you're another woo-woo person, I'm guessing, because mindset is a huge part of our roadmap model, and we have mindset pieces for each step. But what does that mean, and how were you able to utilize it through your whole journey?
Yeah. So I've been in the real estate industry for 20 years and grew up around my dad, who I wrote the book with, who is a huge mindset advocate, right? And he kind of studied under people like Les Brown and John Maxwell and like all these Tony Robbins. Like he got certified with all of them in different courses. And so I kind of grew up with this ingrained in me. And then when I found my Keller Williams company, we teach our real estate agents that 90% of your success is mindset, right? The rest is your skill and your activity. And so with that, I was always very interested in mindset coaching. And after what I had gone through, the ability and need to be able to change your perspective about something and to recognize your triggers and to work through it and to understand that like you can't always control the first thought that comes into your head. Because for a long time I was feeling really guilty about like some crazy thoughts that I would have, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have cancer again. Oh my gosh, this is gonna happen. This adoption thing will never work. But to understand like, okay, I couldn't control that, but I can reframe and I can work my way into a different mindset and use, data or logic or resources to kind of think differently about certain things. And so I did a lot of work on it. I did a lot of courses and training, some NLP, like neuro-linguistic programming, like it's a lot of psychology. It's a lot of the subconscious brain and things that are happening, as you're processing information, a lot of how our past programming affects our future results. And if you want to break that pattern, you have to break your thoughts and your behavior, which then lead to your actions, results, and habits. So when I would find myself struggling, which, still happens from time to time, I'm always like, okay, if I was coaching me, what would I say, right? How would I coach this person through this issue? Because a lot of times we're so hard on ourselves and we can't see the situation from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so, it got easier as more time went on away from the cancer treatments and fear, but it still happens from time to time.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
If I am somebody who has been in the process for a long time and I'm really losing hope and I'm becoming really negative and this is never going to work, and how would you help me reframe my mindset?
Yeah, well, I would want to revisit like why this was so important to you to start with,
Uh-huh.
right? And really, really tap into that. So, why do you want this in the first place? What will that achieve for you? Who else will be impacted by this?
Hmm.
What does your world look like if it doesn't happen? What does your world look like if it does happen? And then I would focus on building action items around the things that you can control that can get you closer to any kind of like ideal result, right? So in this case, you know, if there's any unleft action on anything that needs to happen to be like actively matched, right? Like taking action on finishing anything that's pending. In, sounds kind of, some people like this and some people don't, but using mind calming strategies, like even like short meditations, like distraction strategies that allow you to keep control over your mindset and understand that when you start to go this way, if you know that this is your goal, we've got to get back on track.
Hmm.
So we always say like you can, have your like 5-minute funeral about anything, right? Process it, do it. But then it's like Mel Robbins says, who I had the opportunity to meet this year. It's like five,
Oh,
four,
wow.
three, two, one. Get back into it.
I
Like
read that.
go back, right? Because if that's where
Mhm.
you, this is what you're after, and you're sure that it's still what you want, and you know why it's important to you, then deep down, you just have to do the next best thing. And that's what I do all the time. Tell my people all the time, like, don't worry about a year from now and don't worry about last year, but what is the next best thing that you can do today in the next 24 hours to get you more on track for where you want to be.
Mm.
So
God, so good, Kate.
that's what
And
I love.
I love it too. And it's so important. And thank you. I probably asked you that because I needed it. Because it's easy to get off track and forget all these things that you know to do. Sometimes you know to do.
Mhm.
Um, it does take effort to work through that in your mind, and
Well,
sometimes
the
on
other thing
paper
is
and
that,
sometimes
I've always been taught in my training that gratitude is the highest form of energy, right? So
yes.
when you are in a gratitude mindset, you literally can't be in any other mindset. So even when my people or I'm struggling, I'm like, okay, what am I grateful for today? What is good that's happening in my world? And for a perspective shifter, I always ask people, you know, we all have problems, we all have challenges. If you were in a circle of 100 people and everyone put their problems in the middle of the circle, would you chance taking someone else's problems back, or would you take your own
Yes.
problems back? And
Hmm.
usually, I mean, 10 years ago, I might have said, I'll take someone else's problems. But usually, you'll take your own stuff back, right? Because it's sometimes that perspective of like, you know, if I'm
For sure.
healthy, if I woke up that day, if I have a purpose, if I have a family, if I have whatever's important to me, then like the rest of the stuff we can figure out.
Yeah, I love it. Um, so we talked a little bit about self-advocacy,
Mm-hmm.
and you teach about that. So
Mm-hmm.
how did self-advocacy come into play throughout your cancer, infertility, and adoption journeys? I don't know if you have like an example from each part of your journey and that maybe others can take to apply in their lives as well, because I believe you have to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, I just think like it
Advocate for
comes
yourself.
down to like asking questions and not being afraid to push the envelope or to push back on people that are experts in their field, right? I think
Mhm.
especially in the medical community, what happens a lot is people will take a doctor's advice and not get a second or third opinion. They won't want to ask questions because they don't want to ruffle feathers, or they won't, ask about the research that they did and that they want clarity on, right? So I think it's being more of an active participant and having more control over the hand that you're dealt instead of just taking the hand that you're dealt, right? And
Mhm.
so, um, medically, I mean, just from like coming to every appointment with a list of questions, having done the research, staying there until I felt comfortable, asking to record different conversations
Mhm.
so that I knew I could go back and listen because it was just so overwhelming. Having multiple people with me at different things, you know, asking like, what's the next step? Like, what's the best thing that happens after this? And what's the worst thing that happens after this? So again, going back to just my communication passion is like just always wanting to know what to expect. Right. And as long as I understood that, but most people don't communicate that way, or they weren't taught that, or they're not, they're great medically or whatever, but maybe not in communication. And so I would just kind of force those conversations. And I think it shows up in the work world. I teach on that a lot, like how to advocate for yourself professionally. And I think in adoption, I think working with RG Consulting actually like alleviated a lot of that, because I think that was like the roadmap literally is there. And without that, this process can be really overwhelming and really daunting. So your roadmap is a piece of advocacy for people going through this process, right? Because they can understand it. And I think, in the cancer stuff, it was critical, because people just take what they hear and they take it and they accept it. And sometimes that's not the best thing. And you have to push for yourself and not care what other people think about it, but just know that you did everything that you could to control your outcome.
Well, and I think in the adoption world, families are very, there's a whole power dynamic throughout the entire journey. Mm-hmm. And families are scared to ask questions. Mm-hmm. I often get met with, am I allowed to ask that? Mm-hmm. You're allowed to ask anything you want. They're either going to have an answer or they're not going to have an answer.
Exactly.
They'll either get the answer or they'll tell you they can't get the answer.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, and I guess through advocacy, it's really just asking questions and making sure that you're comfortable enough with what you're about to do or not do. And just people people have fear around it. They care what other people think about it. They don't want to put themselves out there, like different things that cause them to reserve. But what I found is like, I think it's an underutilized skill that a lot of people could benefit from more. And I think learning how to ask balanced questions is really like the way to do it, because you're not trying to rock the boat, but you are trying to politely understand, what does this mean for me? What could it mean? What is the next step here? Like, that's everyone who works with me says they wake up in the middle of the night going, what's the next step?
I love
constantly that. Like, what's the next step?
What's the next step? And that's so good. It's hard for me to understand when somebody doesn't advocate for themselves, because, and my mother taught me the importance of self-advocacy, because she has medical stuff, and she's always shown me the importance of keep asking questions until you understand it. Or, that's great. And that's such great advice. Now I want to hear about the parents' report card. How awesome that you wrote this with your father. How did you come up with this idea? And how has parenting your biological children and your adopted child been different, if at all? So let's talk about how you came up with this idea first.
Yeah. So it was actually my dad's idea that he started to run with when I was a teenager. So I'm the oldest of four. So I have three younger brothers. And because he was always into this like mindset stuff, and he really believed in past programming equals future success, right? And a lot of people grow up in environments where they don't have the programming necessarily that they would like to have, or they could have had to have potentially a different outcome, right? Mm-hmm. And so this was his passion project, but he kind of never really finished it. And he always talked about it, but he has a really high profile career and like a lot of other things that he was prioritizing as well. So we knew about it growing up. We had done the exercise with my parents growing up, but it kind of just stayed there for a while. So as he was getting ready to retire last year from his career, I said, you don't have any more excuses now of why we can't get this book off the ground. I said, it needs some updating. It needs to talk about social media. It needs to talk about electronics and all the different changes in the world today than when I was 16 years old. But I think I really love this idea. And could we work on like a rebrand of it and like a rework of it? And he was thrilled. And so my son Connor helped us pick out all the imaging. We rewrote some of it. So the idea of it is it's basically 12 chapters, which are 12 subjects for the report card.
Okay.
And it's meant as an exercise that can be done together as a family, where you have an open dialogue and an actual report card. There's a QR code in the book where you scan and you get the report card, and they grade you, right? And there's no failing, right? There's no failure. We talk about that a lot, but there is a grading structure that it's more in language that they can understand. And then it prompts you on like how to talk about like, okay, well, why is it that you perceive that you would grade me as a B in leading by example and your dad as an A in leading by example, right? And the things that people have uncovered in that process, including like we've done it with the boys. And it's like, I would have never known that. Like, I would have never known that you felt that way, or that you associated because your dad coaches your baseball, that he's more involved in your interests and your extracurriculars than mom. Right. Even though I'm at every game, I'm like, I'm there. What do you mean?
I cheer louder.
I know. I'm like, what? So I think like just an awareness tool and a way to have the dialogue, because today, I mean, they want to be on their technology. We're on our phones. There's very few times that, and we're purposeful about like a no technology, like dinner time every night. Like that's our time to like connect and like, just no phones, no nothing. But it's a way to open up the dialogue. And if you think about any other industry, you get an assessment, right? You get an annual review, and they tell you you're doing great here. You could improve on X, Y, Z. And we're like, what if that applied to parenting? And what if we could make an impact so that the next generations had more empowerment, right? Or more communication around that, so that they could be better for it.
That's so brilliant. So it's basically a book that you do with your child, where your child is assessing you as a parent and you're assessing your child also, or?
No, so right
Okay,
now
so
it's
it's
just
just the parent.
child assessing parent. And then
Okay.
the book is actually meant for the parent to dive deeper into each chapter, each idea,
Okay.
each subject, and gives you tools on how to advance in that subject, or different ideas about how to implement things in your home that will, improve your relationship in that category.
That's so cool. Now, I'm a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
Is it geared towards like, can anybody, single
Yeah.
or married? Okay, I didn't know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's just, I mean, you actually it's really meant for like one parent and child. So
Okay.
if there's multiple parents, you'd have to do multiple report cards.
Got it.
But yeah, I mean, it's really eye-opening and fun. And the
That's
book
so cool.
itself, yeah, there's a lot of mindset strategy in the book. I mean, we pulled from a lot of different resources, and like the subjects are, leading by example, showing active interest in your child's interest, creating fun and memories, reading, all these different things. So yeah, we're proud of it. It just was released in November of last year. So we're still kind of getting the word out and letting people know, but the people who have taken it and they've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, I will link it down in the show notes for people to grab it, but
Great, thank
definitely
you.
check it out. I will. What lessons have you learned from? Oh, I was asking you about parenting. So, did you? It's interesting. I assume you've done this with all three of your children, or your 4-year-old's still too young?
Yeah, we haven't really done it with her yet.
Okay.
We tried to ask her some of the stuff, but we weren't really getting anything like substantive. I think it really is more geared towards like probably third grade and up for them to really get it.
Yeah.
Maybe second grade. So I don't feel any difference in parenting the biological boys versus Alex.
Yeah.
I do think there's a difference between girls and boys that I'm
Mm.
probably realizing, right? Just the difference in self-play, kind of feelings, like a lot, just different things. But I don't think it has anything to do with biology or her being adopted.
At least not yet. And
Right.
I think one of the things that I have heard be mentioned a lot, and it was definitely true so with my son, is that sometimes you don't want to put an adopted child in timeout by themselves. Whereas a lot of parents do that. And for some kids, they can handle it, and for other kids, not. But that's one of the
Interesting.
things that I've learned. Yeah.
I did not know that. Yeah, I feel like we're parenting them the same way.
Yeah.
And I don't, so far anyway,
Yeah.
it's kind of been, and is what's
Pretty.
been so interesting is like how much, so by the time she was born, the boys were old enough to definitely understand like what was happening. Like they actually came out with us to Kansas. They met her birth
Oh,
mom.
wow.
I have this image in my head. We were at some taco stand, like a random place, and Connor went up and asked her birth mom, "Can I put my hand on your belly?
Mm.
Can I feel my sister?" And
Ugh.
this was like the day before she was induced, and she did, and I'll just like never forget that. Like, so they definitely remember. I mean, we lived out there for several weeks because you have to, go through all the things. And yeah, and then I was able to be in the room at her birth, which was just super special. It was during
Wow.
COVID, so I was the only one allowed in because there was only one person allowed. But yeah.
Wow. That is
Yeah, I
super
don't think there's
special.
any difference yet. I mean, I know time
Yeah.
will tell, and I know there's things that I'm looking for as she gets older, and
Hmm.
challenges that could arise. I'm also keeping. I have a box of her special things. She calls it her magic box, and it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
her birth mom's hospital bracelet and a blanket she made for her and things. And then I still email her birth mom every month. She doesn't always respond, but I told her verbally in the hospital that I would send her 5 pictures every month. And so I have. And so my
Mm.
vision is one day to give that to Alex to say, here's all the correspondence that we've had, and, keep it very open in that way.
Beautiful. Beautiful. What lessons have you learned from your children? How have they shaped your views on parenting and leadership? And let's
You
talk
know,
lessons.
I kind of think about parenting as like the most important leadership that we do. I mean, I do a lot of leadership for work and coaching and real estate.
Nobody's watching you as closely as your children.
Well, that's exactly it. Like that's what I was going to say. It's like the
Yeah.
whole lead by example thing is so key. Like
Hmm.
they don't care what you say, but they watch what you do. And that's probably the biggest thing I learned. Like, and we've implemented sort of these like family core values, like how like a business has core values. So ours is like do what you say you're going to do. You can always control your effort and your attitude. um, the person with the highest energy always wins,
Hmm.
and you either win or you learn, right? So those 4 things we kind of keep
I
as
like
our
that.
core, and then we try to make everything possible a coaching moment without being super annoying. But I know we annoy the other ones at this point. But we break everything down. We make sure they watch us with philanthropy and giving back and charity and helping
Love it.
people, and we always include them in those things and those efforts. Like, let's go bring this family dinner because they had this thing happen, and we want to help them, and let's go give back at the food bank, or let's go join me on my work service day.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that's, I think, just lead by example. That's probably the biggest thing I've learned because they're
Yeah.
all watching.
Always
Yeah.
watching.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking back on your journey, what advice would you give to someone considering adoption, especially if they're facing similar challenges that you did with fertility or health or
Yeah, I would just say like one step at a time. Like
yeah.
it can be really overwhelming, and psychologically when people get overwhelmed, they sometimes will freeze or they'll flee, right? This is like
Mhm.
just the general psychology concept. So
Mhm.
I think that sometimes like the people you were describing earlier that like go all in and then all of a sudden like pull back from it, right? And I think um talking to people that have been through what you've been through. I mean, I'm a huge believer in like sharing your story can be someone else's survival guide, right? Like we hear the quote, we hear that all the time. And that's why I'm super passionate about telling our story, because I want people to know that it wasn't easy. And there were plenty of times to give up, and we didn't. And it wasn't sunshine and rainbows either, but we got here. And now I can't imagine it any other way. So I think keeping tapped into why you want what you want, staying focused on what you can control, which is like the hardest thing ever, and just incrementally moving it forward, and it will build and it'll come together. Or you might get other clarity, right? And it might take you down a different path, and either one's okay. It's kind of like what we tell the kids. It's like a John Maxwell concept, like you win or you learn. So you get the outcome you wanted, or you learn something in the process that allows you to do something else. And those are the only two things that can really happen.
I love that. Kate, thank you so much for sharing your story and being so vulnerable. I do want to end with a round of quick fire questions.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Name a person or organization who has impacted your life as it relates to adoption.
Oh gosh, as it relates to adoption. I mean, I'm going to go back to Rachel. I mean, Rachel was our person. Like she held our hand the whole way. Like I was like, I don't even know. I feel like the investment was, her support was well worth what the investment was in this entire process. So that's my answer, Rachel.
I told her we were recording today. She was very excited.
Tell her I said hi.
It's Rachel Patton. And I feel like you've already said a couple, but do you have a favorite quote?
Oh my gosh. My favorite quote is fear or faith, you choose.
Who said that?
So that is a quote from a program that we teach at Keller Williams, and it's called BOLD, which stands for Business Objective Life by Design, which is where a lot of my training came from. And so it's essentially that you can't have faith and fear at the same time. And it's our choice every second to pick which one we're going to do.
Love it. The next one.
I wrote that on my mirror in my bathroom for 2 years in lipstick, because that's how much I needed to like internalize it when I was really going through it. Because it was in my face every day.
Wow, that's good. There's another tip for people. Well, Brene Brown came up with this one. Fill in the blank. Vulnerability is
empowering.
What are you grateful for today?
Gosh, so much.
I had to throw this one in.
Yeah, so much. I mean, just being here 10 years later to tell the story in the way that I'm telling it, with the happy ending that it came to. And it's almost full circle, right? It's like been 10 years. I'm talking to you about this that your company helped us do. And I'm going to go home and hug my little girl and just be in awe of the whole process, really. So that's what I'm grateful for.
Describe adoption in 3 words.
Wow. Unconditional love. Is that 2 words? 1 word. I'm going to say nurture, because I believe that has a big part of it as well. And sacrifice. I think it's a huge, in the most positive way possible, sacrifice, that when you are an adoptive parent, that you have the ability to be in that role, and that someone had to make a different decision for that to happen. I once heard adoption talked about like this, and I love it. Said, if you were speaking to like my daughter, like you have 2 moms, one who made the decision to give you life and one who's going to teach you how to live it to the fullest. And I loved that. And I thought, wow, that's like super powerful.
Beautiful. Kate Papkin, thank you so much. And I just want to leave our listeners with this. Remember, success is a continuous journey. If you find yourself veering off course, just steer back onto the roadmap until you reach your destination. And whatever you do, never lose hope. Hope is that light inside you that will lead you to your dreams. Kate, thank you so much for being here today. It was so great to talk to you.
Thank you, Becca. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.